There was a girl in the back row of every classroom who nobody really saw. Her name was Lena, and she had perfected the art of being invisible. She never raised her hand. She never spoke unless a teacher called on her directly. She wore the same gray hoodie almost every day, the one with the small hole near the left pocket that she kept meaning to fix but never did. At Riverside Middle School, Lena was the kind of student who slipped through the cracks, not because she was trouble, not because she was failing, but because she was quiet. And in a world that rewards the loud, the quiet ones often get forgotten. Her teachers would sometimes pause during attendance, squinting at her name like they were seeing it for the first time. "Lena Reyes," they would say, glancing around the room until she raised her hand just enough to be noticed. Then they would move on, already forgetting her again. Most people assumed she had nothing interesting going on in her life. They assumed she went home, did homework, watched TV, and went to sleep like every other kid. They assumed wrong. Lena lived in a small apartment on the east side of town, the part where the streetlights flickered, and the sidewalks had more cracks than concrete. Her father worked at a warehouse, loading and unloading trucks from 6 in the morning until late at night. Her mother cleaned houses for families across the city, sometimes 3 or 4 homes in a single day. By the time her parents came home, they were so tired they could barely keep their eyes open through dinner. Money was always tight. There was never extra for anything. No summer camps, no dance classes, no sports teams. Lena learned early that wanting things was a waste of time, so she stopped wanting, or at least she tried to. But there was one thing she could not stop wanting, no matter how hard she tried: music. It started when she was 9 years old. She was walking home from school when she passed by an old church on the corner of Maple Street. The doors were open, and someone inside was playing the piano. Lena had never heard anything like it. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, her backpack sliding off her shoulder, her mouth slightly open. The music floated through the air like something alive. It wrapped around her and squeezed her chest in a way that felt like crying and laughing at the same time. She did not know the name of the song. She did not know anything about pianos or classical music or how those black and white keys could create something so beautiful. All she knew was that she wanted to make that sound. She wanted it more than she had ever wanted anything in her life. From that day on, Lena would walk past the church every single day. Sometimes the doors were closed and she heard nothing. But sometimes, if she was lucky, she would catch a few notes drifting through the walls. She would close her eyes and imagine her own fingers on those keys, creating magic out of thin air. One evening, about 2 years later, Lena made a decision that would change everything. It was late, almost 10 o'clock. Her parents were asleep, exhausted from another long day. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator. Lena lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the piano. She had been thinking about it every night for 2 years, and she was tired of just thinking. She got up quietly, slipped on her shoes, and crept out of the apartment. The church was only a short walk away. The streets were empty and dark, and her heart pounded so loud she was sure someone would hear it, but she kept walking. When she reached the church, she noticed the side door was slightly open. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed it gently. It creaked, and she froze, waiting for someone to shout at her. But no one came. So she stepped inside. The sanctuary was dark except for a single light near the altar. And there it was, the piano. It sat in the corner like it had been waiting for her all along. Lena walked toward it slowly, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. When she reached the bench, she sat down and placed her fingers on the keys. She pressed one note, then another. The sounds echoed through the church, filling the silence with something beautiful. Lena smiled for the first time in weeks. She did not know how long she sat there, pressing random keys, trying to figure out how they worked. But at some point she heard footsteps behind her. She jumped up, ready to run, ready to apologize, ready to cry. But the man standing there did not look angry. He was old, maybe 70 or 80, with white hair and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. "You're the girl who stands outside, aren't you?" he said. His voice was soft, not accusing. Lena nodded, too scared to speak. "I've seen you. Almost every day for 2 years. Standing there, listening." He walked closer and looked at the piano, then back at her. "You want to learn?" She nodded again. The old man smiled. "My name is Mr. Howard. I take care of this church, been doing it for 40 years. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver key. "This opens that side door. Come whenever you want. Play as long as you want. Just don't break anything." Lena stared at the key like it was made of gold. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you let me?" Mr. Howard tilted his head, thinking about the question. "Because music should not be locked away," he said finally. "And neither should people with talent. I don't know if you have talent yet, but I know you have hunger, and sometimes that's even more important." He pressed the key into her hand and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the church. That night, Lena stayed until 2 in the morning. She did not play any real songs. She just touched the keys, learning their feel, their weight, their sound. When she finally went home, she climbed back into bed with the key clutched in her hand, and so began her secret life. Every night, after her parents fell asleep, Lena would sneak out to the church. She found tutorial videos on her old phone, the one with the cracked screen that her cousin had given her. She watched them over and over, pausing and rewinding, trying to copy what she saw. She borrowed books about music theory from the library, reading them by flashlight under her covers. It was hard. Harder than anything she had ever done. Some nights, her fingers ached so badly she wanted to cry. Some nights, she played the same section 100 times and still could not get it right. Some nights, she wondered if she was fooling herself, if she was wasting her time, if a girl like her could ever be good at something like this. But she kept going, night after night, week after week, month after month. 3 years passed and Lena transformed. Not on the outside. On the outside, she was still the invisible girl in the back row. But on the inside, something had changed. She had a secret. She had a purpose. She had a dream that burned so bright it kept her warm, even on the coldest nights. Nobody at school knew. Nobody in her neighborhood knew. Not even her parents knew. It was her secret, her treasure, her reason to keep going. But secrets have a way of coming out. And Lena's secret was about to explode in a way she never expected. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. Lena was sitting in her usual spot in the back of the auditorium, waiting for the weekly assembly to end so she could go back to being invisible. She was thinking about a piece she had been practicing, a Beethoven sonata that had been giving her trouble for weeks. Her fingers twitched slightly against her leg, playing invisible keys. Principal Davis walked up to the microphone and cleared his throat. Most of the students kept talking, not really paying attention. Announcements were usually boring, lost and found items, reminders about homework, warnings about running in the hallways. But then he said something that made Lena sit up straight. "I have exciting news," Principal Davis said, his voice booming through the speakers. "Riverside Middle School has been chosen to host this year's Regional Youth Arts Showcase." A murmur went through the crowd. Lena felt her heart skip. "This is a huge honor," the principal continued. "Representatives from some of the best music academies in the country will be attending. They will be looking for talented young performers, and I am told that scholarships will be awarded to exceptional students." Scholarships. The word echoed in Lena's mind. A scholarship could change everything. It could open doors that had always been locked for someone like her. It could give her a future that did not involve struggling and scraping by. Any student who wishes to perform should sign up with Mrs. Chen in the music room by the end of this week, Principal Davis said. We are looking for singers, dancers, instrumentalists, anyone with talent to represent our school. The assembly ended, and students flooded out of the auditorium, chatting and laughing. Lena stayed in her seat, her mind racing. This was it. This was her chance. After 3 years of playing alone in that church, after thousands of hours of practice, she finally had an opportunity to show what she could do. But doubt crept in almost immediately. Who was she kidding? She had never taken a real lesson. She did not own a piano. She learned from YouTube videos and library books. The students in the school's music program had been training since they were little kids. They had expensive teachers and fancy instruments and parents who drove them to recitals on weekends. What did she have? A cracked phone and a key to an old church. Lena almost talked herself out of it. She almost convinced herself that it was a stupid idea, that she would only embarrass herself, that girls like her did not get scholarships and opportunities. But then she thought about Mr. Howard. She thought about all those nights in the church, playing until her fingers hurt, refusing to give up. She thought about her parents, working themselves to exhaustion just to keep a roof over their heads. If she did not try, she would never know, and she could not live with that. So during lunch, instead of sitting alone in the corner of the cafeteria, Lena walked to the music room. Her hands were shaking when she reached the door. She could hear voices inside, laughter and chatter. She almost turned around, but she forced herself to push the door open and step inside. The music room was full of students from the school's formal program. They stood in a cluster near the teacher's desk, where a sign-up sheet sat on a clipboard. They were all dressed nicely, confidently, like they belonged there. Lena felt their eyes on her immediately. Mrs. Chen, the music teacher, looked up from her desk. She was a thin woman with sharp features and glasses that made her eyes look bigger than they were. She seemed surprised to see Lena standing there. "Can I help you?" she asked. Lena swallowed hard. "I want to sign up. For the showcase. Piano." The room went quiet. Then someone laughed. It was a girl named Rebecca, the school's star pianist. She had been playing since she was 4 years old and had won competitions all over the state. She stood near the sign-up sheet with 2 of her friends, and all 3 of them were staring at Lena like she had just said something ridiculous. "You play piano?" Rebecca asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. Lena nodded. "Yes." "Since when?" "I've never seen you in any music class." "I taught myself." More laughter. Rebecca's friends whispered to each other, not even bothering to hide their amusement. Lena felt her face grow hot, but she did not look away. Mrs. Chen stood up and walked toward her. The teacher's smile was the kind adults give when they think they are being gentle, but are actually being cruel. It was the smile of someone who had already made up her mind. "Lena, is it?" Mrs. Chen said, glancing at a class roster on her desk. "That's very ambitious of you. But this showcase is a serious event. We will have scouts from major academies in the audience. The students who perform will be representing our entire school." "I understand," Lena said quietly. "That's why I want to do it." Mrs. Chen exchanged a look with Rebecca and the other students. It was a quick look, but Lena caught it. It said everything without saying anything at all. "Have you ever had professional training?" Mrs. Chen asked. "No." "Do you have a piano at home?" "No." "Have you ever performed in front of an audience?" "No." Each answer seemed to confirm what Mrs. Chen already believed. She shook her head slowly, like she was dealing with a child who did not understand how the world worked. "I appreciate your enthusiasm," the teacher said, "but we cannot risk the school's reputation on someone without proper training. Perhaps you could help in other ways. We need people to hand out programs, set up chairs, serve refreshments. Serve refreshments. The words hit Lena like a punch to the stomach. 3 years of practice, thousands of hours, and this woman wanted her to pour lemonade. I can play, Lena said, her voice stronger now. If you just let me show you— I'm sorry, Mrs. Chen interrupted. My decision is final. The showcase is too important. Maybe next year, after you've taken some lessons. Rebecca whispered something to her friends, and they all giggled. One of them looked at Lena's worn hoodie and old sneakers and whispered something else. More giggles. Lena stood there for a moment, feeling smaller than she had ever felt in her life. She wanted to argue. She wanted to sit down at the piano in the corner and play until they understood how wrong they were. But she knew it would not matter. They had already decided who she was. They had looked at her clothes, her background, her lack of formal training, and they had written her off. She turned and walked out of the music room without another word. She did not cry. She had learned a long time ago that crying did not change anything. It did not make people see you differently. It did not open doors that were slammed in your face. She walked through the empty hallway, her footsteps echoing off the walls. The weight of rejection sat heavy on her chest, making it hard to breathe. For a moment, she wondered if they were right. Maybe she was fooling herself. Maybe a girl who taught herself piano in a church at night could never compete with students who had real training and real resources. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the hurt and the embarrassment, a small flame refused to go out. It was the same flame that had kept her going for 3 years. The same flame that made her sneak out every night and practice until her fingers ached. They had laughed at her. They had dismissed her. They had told her she was not good enough. But Lena knew something they did not. She knew what she could do when no one was watching. And somehow, some way, she was going to make them watch. She just had to figure out how. What Lena did not know was that someone had seen everything. Mr. Ray had been mopping the hallway outside the music room when she walked in. He was the school janitor, a quiet man in his 50s who had worked at Riverside Middle School for nearly 20 years. Most students did not even know his name. They walked past him every day without a second glance, just like they walked past Lena. But Mr. Ray noticed things. He noticed when kids were struggling. He noticed when teachers were being unfair, and he noticed when the door to the music room was open and voices carried into the hallway. He had heard everything. The laughter, the dismissal, the way Mrs. Chen had told that girl to serve refreshments instead of letting her play. It made his stomach turn. Mr. Ray leaned on his mop and watched Lena walk away down the hallway. Her shoulders were hunched, her head was down, but she was not crying. That struck him. Most kids would have been in tears after something like that. But this girl just kept walking, carrying her hurt in silence. He recognized that kind of strength. It was the strength of someone who had been knocked down before and had learned to get back up without making a sound. There was something else, too. Something that made Mr. Ray pay closer attention. He knew this girl. Not personally, but he had seen her before in a place that had nothing to do with school. Mr. Ray's uncle was a man named Mr. Howard, the elderly caretaker of the church on Maple Street. They had dinner together every Sunday, and for the past 3 years his uncle had been telling him stories about a young girl who came to the church late at night to play the piano. "You should hear her, Raymond," his uncle would say, shaking his head in wonder. "She taught herself. No lessons, no teacher, just pure determination, and she plays like she's been doing it her whole life." Mr. Ray had never seen the girl himself, but his uncle had described her. Small, quiet, always wearing a gray hoodie. Comes from a poor family, probably. Never asks for anything. Just plays. Now, standing in that hallway, Mr. Ray realized he was looking at her. The piano girl from the church. And she had just been humiliated and turned away by people who had no idea what she could do. Something inside him shifted. He was not the kind of man who got involved in things. He did his job, kept his head down, and went home. That was how he had survived 20 years at this school. But some things were too wrong to ignore. That evening, after the students and most of the teachers had gone home, Mr. Ray did something he had never done before. He walked to the principal's office and knocked on the door. Principal Davis looked up from his computer, surprised. In all his years at the school, the janitor had never come to see him about anything. "Mr. Ray, is everything all right?" Mr. Ray stepped inside and closed the door behind him. He was not good with words. He had never been a talker. But he knew he had to try. "I need to talk to you about the showcase," he said. Principal Davis raised an eyebrow. "The arts showcase? What about it?" Mr. Ray took a deep breath. "Today, a student went to sign up for the piano performance. Mrs. Chen turned her away, told her she wasn't good enough because she never had formal training, told her to serve refreshments instead." The principal frowned. "I see. Well, Mrs. Chen is the music director. She has the authority to decide—" "With all due respect, sir," Mr. Ray interrupted, "that girl can play. I know because my uncle has been letting her practice at his church for 3 years. She taught herself from nothing. And she's good, really good." Principal Davis leaned back in his chair, studying the janitor. "You're telling me a student with no formal training taught herself piano and is good enough to perform at a regional showcase?" "I'm telling you she deserves a chance to prove it. That's all. Just a chance." There was silence in the office. Mr. Ray could feel his heart pounding. He had overstepped. He knew it. Janitors did not tell principals how to run their schools. He would probably get in trouble for this. But then Principal Davis did something unexpected. He nodded slowly. "You know," the principal said, "when I announced this showcase, I said it was an opportunity for talented students. I didn't say it was only for students with expensive training. I didn't say it was only for students in the music program." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the empty schoolyard. "What's this girl's name?" "Lena. Lena Reyes." The principal was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned back to Mr. Ray. "Thank you for telling me this. I'll handle it." Mr. Ray nodded and left the office, not sure if anything would come of it. He had done what he could. The rest was out of his hands. But Principal Davis was a man who believed in fairness. He had grown up poor himself, in a neighborhood not so different from where Lena lived. He knew what it was like to be overlooked, to be judged by what you did not have, instead of what you could do. That night, he made some phone calls. The next morning, he made an announcement. The entire school gathered in the auditorium again, confused about why there was another assembly so soon. Lena sat in her usual spot in the back, not expecting anything. She had already accepted that the showcase was not meant for her. Principal Davis stepped up to the microphone. "I have an update about the Regional Youth Arts Showcase," he said. "After some consideration, we have decided to make a change to the selection process." Mrs. Chen, sitting in the front row with the other teachers, shifted uncomfortably. "Starting today, any student who wishes to audition for the showcase may do so," the principal continued. "There are no requirements for formal training. There are no prerequisites. If you have talent and you want to share it, you will have a chance." Whispers rippled through the auditorium. Lena's heart began to beat faster. "Additionally," Principal Davis said, "the auditions will be conducted blindly. Performers will play behind a curtain so that judges cannot see who they are. They will be evaluated purely on their performance. Nothing else." The whispers turned into murmurs. Mrs. Chen's face had gone pale. Rebecca and her friends exchanged worried glances. "This showcase is about talent," the principal said firmly. "Not backgrounds, not bank accounts, not how many lessons you've had. Talent, and everyone deserves a fair chance to show what they can do." He paused and looked out at the sea of students. "Sign-ups will reopen today. Auditions will be held next week. I look forward to seeing what all of you can do." The assembly ended, and students began filing out. But Lena stayed frozen in her seat, her mind spinning. A blind audition. They would not see her old clothes. They would not see that she was the quiet girl from the back row. They would only hear her play. This was real. This was actually happening. She thought about the long nights in the church, the aching fingers, the frustration of playing the same passage over and over until she got it right. All of it had been leading to this moment. When the auditorium was nearly empty, Lena stood up. Her legs felt shaky, but her heart felt strong. She walked to the music room. The sign-up sheet was back on the clipboard, a fresh page with only a few names on it. Rebecca's name was at the top, written in perfect handwriting. Lena picked up the pen. Her hand was trembling, but she did not hesitate. She wrote her name right below Rebecca's. Then she turned and walked away, her head held just a little bit higher than before. She had 1 week to prepare, 1 week to polish everything she had been working on for 3 years. 1 week until she would finally show them what the invisible girl could do, and she was ready. The week before the showcase was the longest week of Lena's life. Every night she went to the church earlier than usual and stayed later than ever. She practiced until her fingers throbbed. She played the same pieces over and over, searching for mistakes, fixing tiny details that most people would never notice. Mr. Howard would sometimes sit in the back pew and listen, nodding quietly in the darkness. "You're ready," he told her one night. "You've been ready for a long time. You just need to believe it." But believing it was the hardest part. During the day at school, Lena felt like a ghost walking through a world that did not see her. She heard students talking about the showcase in the hallways. She saw Rebecca practicing in the music room during lunch, her fingers flying across the keys with the confidence of someone who had never been told she was not good enough. Lena did not let it shake her. She kept her head down, went to class, and counted the hours until she could go back to the church. The night before the showcase, she barely slept. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through every note of the piece she had chosen. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. She had picked it because it was the first classical piece she had ever learned, back when she was 12 years old and had no idea what she was doing. It had taken her months to get through the first movement. Now she could play all 3 movements with her eyes closed, but this performance would be different. She was not just going to play the notes. She was going to play her story, every struggle, every lonely night, every moment of doubt and determination. She was going to pour all of it into those keys and let the music speak for her. When morning finally came, Lena got dressed in the only nice outfit she owned. A simple black dress that her mother had found at a thrift store 2 years ago. It was a little faded, and the hem was slightly uneven, but it was clean and it fit. She looked at herself in the small bathroom mirror and took a deep breath. Tonight, everything would change, one way or another. The school auditorium had been transformed. Rows of chairs filled the space, and a small stage had been set up at the front with a grand piano in the center. A dark curtain hung behind the piano, ready to hide the performers during the blind audition portion of the evening. By 7 o'clock, the auditorium was packed. Parents sat in the audience, some holding flowers for their children. Teachers lined the walls, and in the front row sat 4 people with clipboards and serious expressions. The scouts from the music academies, the ones who held scholarships in their hands. Lena stood backstage with the other performers, trying to make herself as small as possible. There were 12 students performing tonight. Singers, violinists, a flute player, and 3 pianists, including her. Rebecca was one of them. The other was a boy from the 8th grade who had been playing since he was 5. Rebecca stood nearby with her parents, who had come backstage to wish her luck. Her mother was adjusting her daughter's hair, and her father was giving her a pep talk about staying calm and confident. Rebecca wore a beautiful blue dress that probably cost more than Lena's entire wardrobe. Lena had no one backstage with her. Her parents did not know she was performing. She had not told them because she did not want them to worry or to feel bad that they could not be there. They were both working tonight, like they worked every night, but she was not completely alone. In the corner of the backstage area, she spotted Mr. Ray. He was supposed to be setting up chairs, but he had paused to give her a small nod. It was not much, but it was enough. Someone believed in her. Someone knew what she could do. The showcase began. One by one, students walked onto the stage to perform. A girl sang a song from a musical, her voice strong and clear. A boy played violin with technical precision. Rebecca went third, stepping behind the curtain with the kind of calm that comes from years of experience. When she began to play, Lena listened carefully. It was a piece by Chopin, complicated and fast, and Rebecca played it perfectly. Every note was clean. Every tempo was exact. When she finished, the audience erupted in applause. Lena's stomach twisted. Rebecca was good, really good. The kind of good that came from expensive teachers and years of training. How could she compete with that? But then she remembered something Mr. Howard had told her once. Technical skill can be taught, he had said, but feeling, that comes from the soul, and you cannot teach someone to have a soul. More performers took the stage. Some were excellent. Some were nervous and made mistakes. The scouts scribbled notes on their clipboards, their faces unreadable. Finally, it was Lena's turn. Her name was called, and for a moment, she could not move. Her legs felt like they were made of stone. Her heart was beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. But then she thought about her parents, working themselves to exhaustion every single day. She thought about Mr. Howard, who had given her a key and changed her life. She thought about all those nights alone in the church, playing in the darkness, dreaming of a moment exactly like this one. She walked onto the stage. The curtain hid her from the audience. She could hear them murmuring on the other side, but she could not see them. That was good. She did not need to see them. She just needed to play. She sat down at the piano and placed her fingers on the keys. They were shaking slightly. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Then she began. The first notes of the Moonlight Sonata floated into the air, soft and haunting. Lena did not think about the audience. She did not think about the scouts or the scholarships or the people who had laughed at her. She thought about the music. Only the music. She played the way she always played in the church, like no one was listening. Like the piano was an old friend she was having a conversation with. She let every emotion she had ever felt flow through her fingers and into the keys. The sadness of being invisible, the loneliness of having a dream that no one knew about, the frustration of being told she was not good enough, the stubborn hope that refused to die no matter how many times it was crushed. All of it went into the music. She moved through the first movement, then the second, then into the third. The tempo picked up, her fingers dancing across the keys with a speed and precision that surprised even her. But it was not just fast. It was alive. Every note had a purpose. Every passage told a part of her story. When she played the final chord, she held it for a long moment, letting the sound fade into silence. And then there was nothing. No applause. No murmurs. Just complete, total silence. For a terrible second, Lena thought she had failed. She thought the audience was sitting there in disappointment, waiting for her to leave so the next performer could come on. But then she heard something. A single person clapping. Then another. Then another. And then the entire auditorium exploded. The applause was deafening. People were standing up. Lena could hear it through the curtain, a wave of sound that crashed over her and made her eyes fill with tears. The curtain began to rise. Slowly, the audience came into view. Hundreds of people on their feet, clapping and cheering. The scouts in the front row were standing too, their clipboards forgotten, their faces showing something that looked like shock. And then Lena saw the faces of the people who had doubted her. Mrs. Chen sat frozen in her seat, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide. She looked like someone who had just witnessed something impossible. Rebecca stood at the side of the stage, tears streaming down her face. But they did not look like tears of jealousy or anger. They looked like tears of someone who had just heard something beautiful and could not hold back the emotion. Lena stood up from the piano bench on shaky legs. She did not know what to do. She had never received a standing ovation before. She had never received any ovation before, so she just stood there, letting the applause wash over her, letting herself believe for the first time that maybe she was not invisible after all. Maybe she never had been. The days after the showcase felt like a dream that Lena could not wake up from. She won. Not just the school competition, but the entire regional showcase. When Principal Davis announced her name as the first-place winner, the auditorium had erupted again. Students who had never spoken to her before were suddenly crowding around, asking questions, wanting to know her story. Teachers who had never noticed her were shaking her hand and telling her how proud they were. But the biggest shock came 3 days later. Lena was sitting in her usual spot in the back of her English class when a voice came over the intercom asking her to report to the principal's office. Her heart sank. In her experience, getting called to the principal's office was never good news. She walked through the hallways with her head down, wondering what she had done wrong. When she opened the door to Principal Davis's office, she found him sitting behind his desk with a huge smile on his face. And he was not alone. 3 people in formal clothes sat in chairs across from him, each holding folders with official-looking papers inside. "Lena," Principal Davis said, standing up, "please come in. These people have traveled a long way to meet you." The 3 visitors introduced themselves. They were representatives from 3 different music academies, some of the most respected schools in the country. They had been in the audience at the showcase. They had heard her play, and they were all offering her full scholarships. Lena stood frozen in the doorway, unable to speak. Full scholarships. That meant tuition, room and board, private lessons with world-class teachers. It meant a future she had never dared to imagine. "We were very impressed by your performance," one of the representatives said, a woman with kind eyes and silver hair. "Your technical skill is remarkable, especially for someone who is self-taught. But what really stood out was the emotion in your playing. You don't just play music. You feel it. That's something we can't teach. That's something rare." Lena finally found her voice. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I never had lessons. I learned in a church." "I'm nobody." The woman smiled gently. "You're not nobody. You're exactly the kind of student we're looking for. Talent doesn't come from money or fancy teachers. It comes from inside. And you have more of it than most people we see in a lifetime." That evening, Lena went home and told her parents everything. She had been afraid to tell them before. Afraid they would be angry that she had been sneaking out at night. Afraid they would feel guilty that they could not afford lessons for her. Afraid they would not understand. But when she sat them down at the small kitchen table and explained what she had been doing for the past 3 years, her mother started crying, not from anger, not from disappointment, from pride. "Why didn't you tell us?" her father asked, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't want you to feel bad," Lena said quietly. "I knew we couldn't afford lessons. I didn't want to make you feel like you weren't giving me enough, because you've given me everything. You work so hard every single day just to keep us going. I didn't want to add more weight to that." Her mother pulled her into a tight hug, sobbing into her hair. Her father wrapped his arms around both of them, his strong hands trembling. "You are the bravest person I know," her mother whispered, "and we are so, so proud of you." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The local news picked up the story. A reporter came to interview Lena, and the segment aired on the evening broadcast. People in the community who had never known her name suddenly knew her face. Donations started pouring in for the church's music program. Mr. Howard finally got the piano properly tuned for the first time in 20 years. But the moment that meant the most to Lena happened quietly, away from the cameras and the attention. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and she was walking through the empty hallway after school when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Mrs. Chen approaching. Lena's first instinct was to keep walking. She had nothing to say to the woman who had dismissed her, who had told her to serve refreshments instead of play, who had laughed along with the other students. But something in Mrs. Chen's face made her stop. The teacher looked different, smaller somehow. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked like shame. "Lena," Mrs. Chen said, her voice unsteady. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" Lena nodded but did not say anything. Mrs. Chen took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology, a real one. Not just because you won, but because of the way I treated you. I made assumptions about who you were, based on things that had nothing to do with your ability. I looked at your clothes, your background, your lack of formal training, and I decided you weren't worth my time." She paused, her eyes filling with tears. "I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for laughing. I'm sorry for dismissing you. I'm sorry for every student I might have treated the same way without even realizing it." Lena was quiet for a long moment. Part of her wanted to stay angry. Part of her wanted to remind Mrs. Chen of how much that rejection had hurt, how close she had come to giving up because of it. But holding on to anger was heavy, and Lena was tired of carrying heavy things. "I forgive you," she said finally, "but please don't do it to another kid. You don't know what people are going through. You don't know what they're carrying, and you definitely don't know what they're capable of just by looking at them." Mrs. Chen nodded, wiping her eyes. "I won't forget that. I promise." She walked away, and Lena stood alone in the hallway, feeling something shift inside her. It was not just about winning anymore. It was not just about proving people wrong. It was about something bigger, something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Years passed. Lena accepted a scholarship to one of the finest music academies in the country. She studied with teachers who pushed her to be better than she ever thought possible. She performed in concert halls that she had only seen in pictures. She won competitions and awards and earned the respect of people who had dedicated their entire lives to music. But she never forgot where she came from. When she was 25 years old, Lena performed at Carnegie Hall for the first time. It was the biggest moment of her career, the dream she had never allowed herself to dream back when she was a scared girl sneaking into a church at night. Before she walked onto that famous stage, she paused in the wings and looked at a small photograph tucked into her music folder. It was a picture of the old piano in the church on Maple Street, the one with the chipped keys and the out-of-tune strings, the one that had changed her life. Mr. Howard had passed away 2 years earlier, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 89. But before he died, he had told her something she would never forget. "You were never invisible, Lena," he had said, holding her hand in his frail fingers. "You were just waiting for the world to open its eyes." She carried those words with her onto the stage at Carnegie Hall. She carried them with her every time she sat down at a piano. And she carried them with her when she started a foundation to provide scholarships for underprivileged music students across the country, kids just like her who had talent but no resources, dreams but no opportunities. Because Lena knew the truth now. She knew that sometimes the people who are laughed at are the ones who end up changing the world. She knew that the quiet ones, the invisible ones, the ones who sit in the back row and never raise their hands, sometimes have the loudest voices of all. They just need someone to listen. And from that moment on, Lena made sure she was always listening, because somewhere out there, in a church or a garage or a bedroom with thin walls, another kid was teaching themselves something beautiful, and they deserved to be heard too.